All right, we're going to begin with the formal section of today's party. We have 5 speakers today to talk about Ted and their relationship with him, and I can assure you it will be very enlightening and entertaining for all of us, maybe except for Ted, but that's what a retirement party is all about. So grab a seat or grab a spot. Before we get started, I do want to thank everyone for coming. This is just a wonderful group of beautiful people. This is such a fabulous mix of people who have been part of Ted's life for the past 30 years. I think Stephen Beckwith, actually, who is our timer. I don't know where Steve is. He's here somewhere. There he is. I think we don't have an award, Steve, but if we did have an award, I think you would get it because Steve actually predates Ted at Elmira Raceway. He has worked there since 1978 when he worked in admissions first, and by his own account let in a bunch of his friends for free, which Ted would frown upon. You're lucky he didn't work there then. So there are so many people from so many aspects of Ted's life, and I'm sure he's so tickled to have all of you here today, and we really appreciate it. Before we get started, I would also like to thank the 5 gentlemen that are going to speak today. We really appreciate them speaking. And after the speeches, Ted will, I assume, come up and give a speech. I hope he will come up and give a speech, and then we will present his gift to him, and then we will cut the cake, and Ted will cut the cake. He'll just cut the first piece. I guess we'll cut the rest of the pieces for him. And then you're free to mingle and party on. So without further ado, I'd like to call up our first speaker today, Paul Walker. He's the president of the Grand River Agricultural Society.
Thank you everyone for coming today. I really appreciate the great turnout. I'm sure Ted really appreciates seeing all his friends and all the people that he's worked with for the past 30 years with Elmira Raceway and Grand River Raceway. I picked out 4 things today about Ted that I thought were very important. I met Ted in 2000 when he was trying to move the racetrack here to Center Wellington. Met him coming out of council one day. At that time I was president of the Center Wellington Chamber of Commerce, and we had a lot of interest in having a new business come to our community. It's a big plus to get something here as big as this raceway. So we did everything we could in our powers to help Ted and the Grand River, or the Woolwich Agricultural Board at that time, to fulfill their vision by coming here to Center Wellington. So I labeled Ted as a survivor. He's been with the Raceway for 30 years, early days in Elmira from 87 to 2003. He did everything he could to keep the doors open at Elmira Raceway. They were going through some financial hardships at that time, so he did whatever he could to keep racing alive in Elmira. He started simulcast in, I'm not sure which year, but in the 90s, that helped all the racetracks in those days bring more money to the local racetracks and allowed you to bet on other races while you sat in one particular place. Also, I labeled him as a big visionary. He's totally responsible for guiding a move of a whole organization to another community when you could not do it where your home was. So I give big credit to the board at that day and Ted for having a vision to say, horse racing is not going to die on our watch. We're going to find a new home for horse racing. We're going to find a home that will allow us to have slot machines, because that's what the province of Ontario is dictating for our business. So really big visionary, really big applause to Grand River, or Woolwich Agricultural Board at that time, plus Ted for leading and guiding them and working together to get the move here. Also a builder. I mean, just look around, building what we have today at Grand River Raceway. It started from a piece of dirt here, and believe me, it was a piece of dirt. It sat empty for years. It flooded all the time. It was a swamp. It was everything but a building ground. And when you bring something this big to a community of our size, and at that time we were probably, 4,000 people for a population of Elora, we just amalgamated with the rest of the community. And it's big. I mean, it's like when we got Jefferson. It's a great benefit to our community, and it doesn't happen very often. So for that, fortitude, knowledge, commitment, The work it took from the current board in those days, not knowing what was going to happen. They're sitting at meetings deciding whether they should spend this money. How do we come up with 25 million to build a new building? Who's going to finance this? Who's going to do all these things? It is really, really tough work. I'm sure they had board meetings well past midnight every time they had a meeting. And they're visionary, along with Ted doing the groundwork and making sure that they understood what was happening and going out and getting everything done, meeting with the people here, living through a 14-hour public meeting that I believe lasted to 3:30 in the morning. I have never seen anything before that, and I have never seen anything after that. That was one of the most interesting nights I think I have spent in my life. So they went through all that, they developed a plan, they came and broke the ground, and they built what we have here. So Ted, congratulations for doing all that. I think that was really, really good. And from a resident of Elora, I thank you for bringing that type of business to our community. And the last point I have is a steadying influence. It shows with our staff, our clients, and customers. People come here to the races because they love coming here. We build a great environment here, and it's all based on Ted's leadership, knowledge, and what our staff does every day to take care of our customers when they show up. I also like to thank our board of directors. They're here guiding us along, and yes, sometimes we ask impossible things of our general manager and our staff, but that's our job. Our job is to keep moving the organization forward and keep building on what they've put together today and built upon. So, from the board of directors, we appreciate, Ted, all of you have done in the past 30 years for this organization. And thank you from the board. On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you, your family, for all you've done, and I hope you really do enjoy your retirement. Thank you.
All right, Paul. Thank you very much, Paul. We have another speaker on behalf of the board before we get to Don, though. We did have a lovely celebration on Friday, our annual staff appreciation dinner where we award our 10-year service awards. And this year we also honored Ted, and it was a lovely night and very touching. And it really illustrated how many people have worked at Elmira Raceway and Grand River Raceways for so many years, and one of those individuals, although he works here now as a contractor, not as an employee, but he's been around for a very long time. So Gary Guy, our track announcer here, who of course worked at Elmira Raceway, he'd like to say a couple words as well.
Actually, I wasn't planning on speaking because I do that all the time. A lot of you have to listen to me more than you probably want to. But, I did want to speak just one thing about Ted, and when I think about Ted Clarke, I'm kind of Kelly, I'm really sad about Ted leaving because, and it's especially important to me, is Ted's a big part of my success in my life. And you probably don't know that my first job when I worked at Elmira Raceway was I cleaned out the ship installs. I was cleaning out I was shoveling the ships. And it just dawned on me a minute ago, I was thinking, I'm here 25 years later, and I'm sort of doing the same job, but in a bigger capacity. But the thing that I most would remember about Ted all the way along is, even at that low level, my job, which is probably not that important back then, Ted treated me like I was just as important as many of the officials that you'll hear that Ted will have brushed shoulders with during his career. You didn't really matter who you were on the ladder of importance. You were important to Ted, and your input mattered. You'll notice around this organization that I think we've grown because everybody has a valid opinion in Ted's eyes, and he'll take time. Whether it's the assistant janitor or whoever it is, Ted listens to everybody, thinks it through, and sees what to make of that. And I think that's a big part of Grand River Raceway's success, is that everybody matters here. And that's why we've been able to grow. And that's why that many people here today have shown up to congratulate and wish Ted on to his next adventure. That's all I really wanted to say. It's just I really appreciate all these 25 years since I first met Ted in 1992. And I'm positive that my life has been so much more enriched by having Ted in my life. And I don't think I'd be where I am today if I didn't have, besides just as my boss, he was really a mentor and a role model for me, somebody to look up to. And I think in this world today, we need role models. We need people that we can look up to and say, that's something for me to aspire to. I'm going to be more like that person. And that example, and Ted for me was that. And that's all I really wanted to impart about Ted, is I just appreciated very much having more than just a boss, a role model in my life for the past quarter century. Thank you very much, Ted.
All right, thanks very much, Gary. Next up we have Don Jewett, who is the past president of the Grand River Agricultural Society, and as I'm sure he will explain, was the president during the time when we moved from Elmira to Elora.
Yankee Stadium, located in New York City, home of the major baseball team, the New York Yankees, is often referred to as the house that Ruth built. Babe Ruth was a baseball superstar whose prime years coincided with the original stadium's opening and subsequent beginning of the Yankees' winning history. So I stand here this afternoon in the house that Ted built. We all know and have recognized Ted's accomplishments in the racing industry. His induction into the Canadian Horse Racing Hall of Fame is indicative of that. But my comments today are surrounding the Woolwich Ag Society, the Elmira Raceway, and now the Grand River Ag Society and Raceway. Ted's leadership really and truly gave our organization and brought our organization to where it is today. In the late 1980s, and Paul has sort of alluded to it, the Raceway and the Ag Society, we were broke. Although Ted was a practicing large animal vet, and my first introduction to Ted was when he visited our dairy farm in Waterloo, and I believe he hit his head on our low-line milk line. His passion for the racing industry, especially the horsemen, was evident as he devoted his time and efforts into saving the raceway so there would be a place for the horsemen to race. Ted's humility would suggest that people like Abner B. Martin, Milo Shantz, and Jim McLeod were instrumental in achieving this, and that is true in some respects. However, I would suggest that in Ted's involvement in setting up a structure to give success to the raceway was under his leadership, and only as a result of this did we come to where we are today. He tells the story of how he stopped at a payphone while making a farm call to the Ontario Racing Commission, and Ted would argue you couldn't do that today, but he was put through, and Ted pitched his idea of a simulcast theater in Elmira, and as we all know, it happened. When the raceway became profitable, paid off its debts, and started to accumulate cash reserves, Ted knew that the Ag Society was required by law to oversee the raceway and the cash reserves it was accumulating. And so began his process of recruiting key board members. I remember when he called me and pitched the opportunities and challenges being on the Woolwich Agricultural Society Board of Directors would provide. My first thoughts were, no, I'm really not interested. I just moved to Elmira, I sold my farm, I bought a feed business, I have family involvement. You know, all those typical excuses when we really don't want to take on anything. But as he talked further, I became convinced that this was an incredible individual who was keen on building a sound organization that would benefit all of agriculture and the horsemen in particular. And when he said, "You will be expected to do all of this, Don, without compensation," he closed the deal. How could I say no? But Ted was right. From the introduction of the slots at racetrack program, moving to Elmira, the building of here of Elora, the end of the slots at racetrack program, and now to the introduction of the new gaming partnership, the challenge and opportunities were there for the board. I came to trust Ted's instincts. He was knowledgeable, visionary, pragmatic, decisive. He had absolutely no patience for incompetence. Qualities I relied on as to be keeping this diverse board together to do the things we needed to do. The fair no longer was our main responsibility and focus. Ted's conviction that the Ag Society would be better off going in this new direction was what I needed. Not unlike the ORC Commission, who bought into Ted's vision of simulcast for the Meyer Raceway. So we are here today in a building I will refer to as the house that Ted built. Ted at times would start a phrase, well, to be frank, and so on, and usually suggested that we now pay attention. When we developed our policies as a board that would govern us and our actions going forward, the role of the general manager was defined as, thou shalt not fail to. Well, Ted, and he always was quick to make us aware of that. So Ted, to be frank, you did not fail. A man once told me that his father, a local politician, wanted him to be involved in politics. He asked his father why. His reply was, because you're capable. So Ted, your father may not have convinced you to get into politics, but he was correct in his assessment of you. You are capable. It has been my privilege to have worked with you to help build this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don. I'm glad someone has pointed out some of those Tedisms today. Our next speaker up is Jamie Martin, who is VP of Racing at Woodbine and is our new leader, coincidentally, here at Grand River Raceway. I did ask him to speak prior to this announcement that he would be joining us. So Jamie has known Ted for many years as well. Jamie.
Thanks, Kelly. Great comments from Don and Paul and Gary earlier. So I just wanted to, on behalf of our racetrack colleagues, I have a few of them joining me here today from Western Fair, Flamborough, and some of the, I see from the Hall of Fame as well. It's great for you guys to come out and help recognizing Ted's career and celebrating with us today, because this is a celebration, but it's also appreciation for what Ted has done. And Paul and Don mentioned many things that Ted's faced over the years, challenges with the racetrack, and how through his leadership, which is something they kept talking about, his leadership got the organization through. And of course, I started at Western Fair in 1990, so I've been working with Ted since then. And you know, even if I think back, just one example of how his quiet leadership helped us get the job done, which was, you know, in the early 90s, we wanted to open some teletheaters. We formed the Ontario Teletheater Network. Ted was integral in that being created. But at the time, actually, the Elmira was doing okay. Their purse structure was better than any of our other tracks on a daily basis, actually. And they had overcome the difficulties they had in the late 80s, and things were going fine. So why would Ted want to, things were going so well, why would he want to open up sites that would draw people away from his racetrack, and really sort of help not only the other racetracks that are part of the network, but the horse people that race at those racetracks. And he wanted to do it simply because, as he said many times, it was just the right thing to do. And what he was always able to do is, well, certainly his interest was primarily the success of the horse people and the association at Elmira and now at Grand River. He always considered the general good of the industry, always. And which is why he was, you know, in horse racing we have many committees and advisory committees and advisory boards and boards that people get called to serve on. And Ted served on many of them because he has a lot to offer, because he can bring people together, because he considers all stakeholders when he's looking to get something done, because it's the right thing to do. So that was just, there've been many other challenges that we've been able to overcome, some better than others, and it was really through Ted's leadership that helped us all get there. And so, I mean, his counsel was good for all of us at the racetracks and for me personally as well, which I'll always appreciate it, because I'm sure, I just want to let Ted know that even though he is retiring, I do expect to call him many times in the future, and I hope he'll take those calls. And certainly I hope that not only visits us regularly here at the racetrack in Aurora, but at all of our racetracks in Ontario when he gets a chance. He's always welcome at all of them. So on behalf of myself and all of the racetrack colleagues I have here today, I want to congratulate Ted on his retirement and certainly appreciate everything he's done for the horse racing industry in Ontario. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jamie. Before we get to our next speaker, I just wanted to take a moment, if you would, if we could acknowledge the staff who prepared all of today's delicious eats. Emma and her staff. Not only because it is delicious as usual, but also because their preparation of said eats means they're not able to join us in this celebration. So we appreciate their sacrifice, and by all means, when the speeches are done, please dig in and enjoy all that is there to offer. Also want to thank our HR manager, Rena, our bookings coordinators, Jenna and Carolyn, and everyone else who helped to put today's event together. All right, so our next speaker is John Bax, who of course is a horseman, a trainer, and a very good friend of Ted's for a very long time, and was active with the Ontario Harness Horse Association for a long time. I think probably when Ted was as well. So John would come forward.
It's an honor to speak on behalf of so many horse people who have benefited from Ted's contribution to the race industry. I met Ted back in the early 90s when we were both directors at OHA. I always made sure that when we went to lunch, I would sit next to Ted, not only for his pearls of wisdom, but Ted didn't eat dessert, so I got his dessert. Still carrying it. So many people, most people would know that Ted was instrumental in saving Elmira, as it's been alluded to, and building Grand River from the ground up. When Ted would need a favor, it was always hard to say no, because you knew it was for the betterment of racing. It took a tremendous amount of work by Ted and his staff to make Industry Day into what it is today, a must-go event in your schedule. To work at Grand River, you're required to be loyal, committed, and work hard. In my opinion, Grand River is the most customer-friendly racetrack in Ontario, and chances are North America. If it wasn't for Ted's leadership, I think that would have never been the case. It was his doing that, people followed him, and it's always been that way. It's hard to look at Ted and argue with him, because first of all, he never raised his voice. So Ted, enjoy your retirement. I'm sure Val has a honey-do list for you.
Thanks, Mr. Bax. All of today's speakers, we've selected them because I knew that Ted was terribly fond of them. That's not to say that he's not terribly fond of all of you as well. But I know that one of the things that he particularly likes about John Hayes is, our next speaker, is his sense of humor. So without further ado, Mr. Hayes.
A warning, this is the irreverent part of the program. These poems are more fun when the subject you roast is some guy whose bad habits you can burn up like toast. But propriety and rectitude more accurately define Ted. Hell, I bet, as a kid, he never once wet the bed. So highly regarded is Ted by his peers, from excellence in academics through 2 equine careers. His calm demeanor and common sense made his skill set complete, whether negotiating with horsemen or wrestling broodmares in heat. Ted once called me an intransigent guy. Stubborn? Who, me? No idea why. No offense was taken, though try as I might, because true to Ted's form, even his insults are polite. I raced at GR an iffy trotting mare. My co-owner from Boston happened to be there. When asked, Ted offered to a losing loyal fan. Bet Hayes, for his owner, has traveled far to be on hand. He cashed 15 to 1 and had the only try. Needless to say, Ted was one popular guy. So Ted's retirement avocation shouldn't be in doubt. His track record suggests he'd make one hell of a tout. Retirement, I found, is a double-edged sword. The freedom is nice, but cutting the cord means vacuums to fill, quenching new thirst. And if retirement is for family, be sure you've asked them first. Weekdays and weekends, they'll all seem the same. Available to run errands becomes your claim to fame. And you transition from being your wife's heartthrob to a retirement husband who's Val's full-time job. So Ted, remember, as you walk out the door, as much as you've given, leave him wanting for more. And even though you depart at the top of your game, tomorrow, some upstart won't know your name.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes. All right, so that concludes our speeches. At this time, I'd like Ted to come up. I demand Ted to come up and give a speech. Following Ted's speech, we'll ask the board members that are joining us today to come up for the unveiling of Ted's gift, and bit of kismet here. The rather hideous ribbon that is wrapped around this present is actually the ribbon from the ribbon cutting ceremony for the opening of Grand River Raceway. So we don't throw out anything here. Namely, the marketing department doesn't throw anything out. I think he's just getting a beer and then he'll be up.
Well, this is a bit of an overwhelming position to be in. So I suppose I should call on my common sense and thank you all and say go on home. It's the fact that so many people showed up here today would tell you how many people have helped me out along the journey to get here. I have some veterinary colleagues in the crowd that I was telling John Hayes earlier today, the first time I ever went to a horse race was with Jack Galbraith and Jim Mitchell, who's standing in the front row here. Jack actually trained the horse in a little spot outside of Guelph, and I did get the odd chance to go there and help him clean stalls. But at any rate, he took this horse to Mohawk and won a trot, a cheap trot. And we thought we had the world by the tail, of course, and so I had a marvelous introduction to horse racing then. I'm different from many of you who have been in the horse business since the time your feet hit the ground, and I didn't grow up in the horse business. Well, my father did give me some instruction as to how to drive the 2 workhorses we had that pulled a sleigh full of manure to the field. Kept your feet warm anyway in the wintertime. But it's, really, to be frank, the results that we have here, and I appreciate the Babe Ruth analogy, since he was my favorite baseball player for a long period of time. The fact that this place got built wasn't because of me, it was because of everybody who kicked in and helped out, and in that long public meeting, I think OHA probably sent 3 busloads of people and fed them in order to have an audience at that meeting. They didn't have to do that. They did it because they wanted to make progress. And so we've gone a long way without anybody being really put out all that much, and at the same time managed to achieve something that I hope will carry you through the next 30 years or however long you wish to be here. And as Jamie suggested he might call, I'd be disappointed if he didn't. Nonetheless, if he does, I'll be glad to answer as I should. I should echo, I think it was Kelly who responded, thanking the ladies for preparing this luncheon this afternoon and making the day what it is. That's not unlike what we would expect of people to do when they're here at at Grand River. I'm thinking back in time, obviously it's time for me to retire because I'm not able to focus on anything in the future. But it's been a remarkably enjoyable experience, I suppose would be the best way to say it. I've really had fun doing all of this stuff, building the place. Of course, I could walk around with a white hard hat on, looking like I was really somebody important, and nobody knew the difference, right? It fooled some of the people some of the time. So I guess to properly say thanks to the people I should say thanks to, certainly that group of board members in Elmira for the Ag Society put up with a whole lot of really tough going, and certainly I know that Don Jewett, who spoke, and Melissa Snyder, who isn't here today, but who certainly was a big part of that effort, came here to Elora and paved the way with the merchants to gain some confidence in the locale by visiting those people in their shops and so on, and actually making people know what we truly were trying to bring. That sort of thing, when you take people out of their daily lives and have them volunteer to go out and stick their neck out for you, that's a big commitment, and they surely did. The board, as it's going forward, as it has come forward, is certainly developing in its business understanding and so on, and I think Jamie is going to land in a group of people who are very capable of making the right decisions. And I'm terrifically pleased that Jamie is going to be that person, because I don't think I've heard him raise his voice either, and so it actually will fit in quite nicely. My association with OHA, the Ontario Harness Horse Association, began about 1980 or 81. And through that organization, I got to meet a lot of people in the business. One of them is a fellow named Joe Burke, and I know he's here today, or at least he was here not long ago. And I'd ask him to stand and just I'd ask you to applaud him for all of the wisdom that he imparted to me in those 10 or 12 years that we were associated together in that organization. He gave me more advice about how to run a racetrack and how to run racing and the things that were good for racing and so on and so forth than anybody else. Joe, just stand up and let people know that you're here. people like Joe, one of the advantages of both sitting on the board, I sat on the board of both OHA and the Ontario racetracks, I think it was called Racetracks of Ontario was the organization that it was called at the time. So I could go to one meeting and hear how bad the racetracks were, and I could go to the next meeting and hear how bad the horsemen were, and I pretty well had a grip on who was doing what. The thing I could always say I didn't have a conflict of interest, and neither one of them paid me, so I was working without compensation on both cases. But it was an extremely helpful position to be in, because I got to understand the difficulties of both groups, and it has served me well throughout the time. I think it would serve racing well if, in fact, a whole lot of people sat on more than one board and heard more than one interest. It's a group where there's always been a large divide, and I don't think it's helpful. So if you want my parting words of wisdom, there they are. At any rate, I know that many of you have traveled a good deal of distance to come here today. I really appreciate seeing every one of you, and I thank all of you for your help along the way. We wouldn't be here without it, and we certainly, I doubt if we'd ever got out of Elmira without it, to be frank. So thank you very much. I'm sure I've missed thanking somebody for their efforts and or some special thing that you have done. Anything that you have done, we appreciate, and we appreciated it at the time. And although I'm too old to remember them all now, I really do thank you. I don't think there's anything else to end the speech with but those two words. Thank you very much.